Before the weekend, how did you think that the national media viewed Tennessee? And then I want to move forward with the line moving already. You had them moving in the polls, but before the weekend, how was Tennessee viewed? Caleb, let me start with that. And then after the weekend, how were they viewed? Because you had some significant losses by teams we thought were championship contenders. So give me a before and after how Tennessee was viewed as a championship contender.
I don't think much has changed before and after the weekend for Tennessee with this bye. I think they're still viewed as I think most national analysts are looking at Tennessee as kind of maybe in a transition year where they're capable of competing with championship contenders, but they're not necessarily a championship contender this year. I think because people overreact to Georgia every week, and we'll talk about this later in the show, I think they have thrown out any chance of Tennessee winning the East because of what Georgia did to Kentucky. I actually reject that argument. I understand where people come from with that. But I think more than anything, I think how they view Tennessee as a team hasn't changed. I think how they view some of the competition has changed. And I think all of a sudden people go from, oh my God, Georgia struggled on the road against a rival that they always struggle against, so they must be bad, to, oh my gosh, Georgia beat Kentucky, they must be good, which is hilarious. So they're thinking Tennessee has no shot against Georgia because Georgia blew out Kentucky, which is laughable to say out loud.
Here are my thoughts on Tennessee after what I saw over the weekend. And you're right. Yeah, Heather Dinich, who we had on, I was watching her on the plane, and she was talking about how Georgia and Alabama reassert themselves as king of the SEC. I thought that was a little bit strong. I watched the weekend being able to not have to focus on Tennessee as we do, and I think it's pretty wide open. I do still think Georgia, as I've said all along, that they do play down to their opponent. They're the preeminent program right now in the nation, and if it was them against the field, I would have to think long and hard about it. I'd probably still take the field. That's the smart bet, Caleb. But it is a little bit more difficult to try to pick the top elite teams. If I gave you 5 elite teams and I responded with 5 elite teams, I bet they're not the same. In other words, this may be a transition year for Tennessee, but it may be a good year to be a transition year, because is there an elite team right now that you say you would take against the field? No. And I probably would have said Georgia about that last year, even though they played down to their opponent, and they have done so this year. They didn't do so over the weekend. I just don't know that there's an elite team right now in college football, Caleb, that you point to and you say, them versus the field, let's have a real argument.
No, I'm with you. This has all the markings of 2007 happening all over again. And by the way, it sounds like you're on my side, Dave, because you're like, this is a good year to be a transition year. So what you're saying is this isn't going to perpetually be the case, what's happening this year, where there's no elite team. Meaning you don't think parity is that college football's in for more parity long term with NIL.
Well, no, because the transfer portal and NIL, I do think they're in for more parity long term. Maybe not at the bottom end. I think those teams are going to struggle because of less funding, because they're not going to have the TV deals. But on the top end, I don't think you're going to see a Georgia, which they've done over the past 3 years, or an Alabama, which they've done over the past decade plus, dominate the sport. I don't think you're going to see those type of, shall we say, New England Patriot type of teams.
So does that make this year a blip on the radar? Because you're saying it's a good year for Tennessee to be a transition team, but I'm arguing that maybe it's not, because there's going to be even more parity down the line, isn't there?
Well, I think it's a blip on the radar because of quarterback play to some extent. I think if you had elite quarterback play at a couple of different schools in the SEC, you'd be having a totally different conversation. But no, I think parity. I think you're going to see, this is the type of football you're going to see. Now, Georgia might still be elite, right? Because they've played down to their opponent and come through in the clutch. So they might still be elite. But if they're not, then I think you see more and more of that as time goes on, because of the transfer portal and NIL, that there's not going to be an elite program. So The other thing that definitely caught my eye as we asked today's tough question, championship contender or no, how does the national media view Tennessee? I think they view them in that second tier of teams that if things fall the right way, they could be a championship contender. So I'm hedging my bet just a little bit. So I will say yes. I think you look at about 20 teams. There's 5 or 6 of which should be on that upper tier. I say that, and then you have Southern California who just can't stop Powell Middle School from scoring. Michigan may be the best program in the nation right now. So I think there's another tier, Caleb. If things fall right, which for Tennessee, it'd be stay healthy, and they haven't. It would be get better quarterback play, more consistent quarterback play, and they've started to, I believe, with Cooper Mays back into the fold. Caleb, I think they're on that second tier of championship contender. So I guess I would have to say no to the question if we had to go yes or no. But I think that could change in just a couple of weeks with who Tennessee has coming up if they play well.
I'm right where you are. I think right now, no, but not not impossible. But look, we're going to know in 2 weeks. We're going to know in 2 weeks if November is going to matter for Tennessee or not. Like this is the 2 most important weeks of Tennessee's season. So we'll know pretty quickly.
You're right. The line moves by 4 points. Now, I thought last week or 2 weeks ago, when Tennessee was a significant double-digit favorite over South Carolina, that the guys in Vegas knew something about Cooper Mays and that he was coming back. I thought that, and I gave you a wink and thought that on a Monday when we did our show before the South Carolina game. But explain this line to me and why it's moved by 4 away from the Vols. Tell me what that means, because you know gambling better than I do.
So this was shocking to me because you and I talked last Monday for Tennessee's early line against Texas A&M. They were favored by 7 before last weekend's slate of games. And on top of that, Tennessee, they were double-digit favorites over A&M at the beginning of the year if you did a futures bet. And then it became a touchdown favorite last week. Then after how Texas A&M played Alabama, the line moved to Tennessee -3. Now, I'm a little confused by this because I got to be honest. I don't know. They're reacting to Texas A&M playing Alabama close. Well, one, the reason this is weird for them to act this way is Alabama covered. So Alabama covered Vegas' own spread that they set against Texas A&M. So how is Texas A&M going to underperform their own expectations? And then they're going to say, well, based on that, we're going to move the line in their favor for when they're going to play Tennessee. Something tells me that they think they just react. Vegas themselves and the odds makers think are second guessing themselves for giving Tennessee too many points last week. Because look, let's be honest. Tennessee's favored by 3 or 4 now, depending on the sportsbook you use. That's a pick 'em. That's a pick 'em because Tennessee's at home and coming off a bye. And Vegas takes those 2 things into account.
Today's tough question brought to you by our friends at Hemp House Chat with 2 T's, hemphousechat.com. Only the premier CBD and Delta 9 products that are right there. And they've got the Big Orange Crunch. Check out the Big Orange Crunch. Use the promo code on any product and you get a 10% off. So we encourage you to do that. Hemp House Chat with 2 T's, hemphousechat.com. All right, Josh Heupel coming off of a bye week. I read all your stuff, Caleb. Don't take this wrong, but I purposefully didn't read this because I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. First, though, let's talk about the rankings. Tennessee is in that top 20 range, which again, I think would speak to they could be a contender, but not quite yet. What do you think?
Yeah, they're tied for number 19 in the AP poll, and they are number 17 in the coaches poll, which is exactly what we've talked about. There are 2. I wanted to point this out. There are 2 teams they play the rest of the way that are ranked higher than them right now, which would be obviously Alabama and Georgia. However, FPI and SP Plus both have Texas A&M above Tennessee, also, but barely by like 1 spot each, which would put like 8 and 4 on the table if they lost to every team ranked higher than them. But they get A&M at home, but they also get Missouri and Kentucky on the road. So again, we're still looking at a Tennessee team where the range is 6-6 to 10-2 for Tennessee right now.
Well, I don't think they're going to go 6-6. That would, if you had to take 6-6 or 10-2, which would you take?
If I had to bet, I'd bet 10-2. But I'm saying that's the range right now. Well, the range is theoretically 11-1. But I mean, do you really think this Tennessee team, from what you've seen, is beating Alabama on the road and Georgia at home? I don't see that happening.
No, but I didn't think they'd beat Alabama last year.